What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Slithering Salamanderscapes. I am going to be updating the habitat for my Barred Tiger Salamanders. They're currently in a paludarium, which is a 40-gallon breeder. I'm going to be putting them in a brand new 40-gallon breeder. This old enclosure is just not appropriate anymore. When I got them, they were partially in the larval stage still, so they had some gills. And so I built this paludarium for them to eventually crawl out of the water, like their ancestors did many, many millions and millions of years ago, and to come onto land. However, I just don't think this is the right enclosure anymore for them. It's just some of the plants have died. One of the salamanders is much smaller than the other one. It's about half the size. I don't think there's any chance that this larger one that's out here in the water feature could eat the other one, but I want to separate them for a while I build a new enclosure and try to fatten them up. See, that's the big one. And plus, it gets gunked up. It's not really the best suitable enclosure for these anymore. I want to have something fully terrestrial with a really large underground complex built. So I'm going to endeavor to do something like that. But look at all this nasty cyanobacteria, algae, other stuff. It's just not great anymore. I liked it. I loved this enclosure at one point. It's just not right. I'm going to use it for something else. And I am going to go out and get myself a new tank to start fresh. So that will be good. And here's the small one. I'm going to fatten him up in this bin. This is all the substrate, which is seeded with isopods and also some springtails and things like that. So I'm going to let him eat some waxworms and some night crawlers in here. And I'm going to go get this tank, which I'm really excited about. And we're going to start this build. So I believe this tank was captive bred here domestically, but I can't be 100% sure. And it is a Marineland 40-gallon breeder. And this is what will be housing the tiger salamanders. And this is pretty standard and something I typically use. Check this awesome thing out that I bought. This is like a lift table. I herniated 2 discs in my lower back, which sucks. And so this thing is going to save my life, literally, while I work on tanks from now on. I can still pick them up, but don't want to hurt myself. But pretty snazzy, huh? Really like this thing. So let's get started with 1/2 inch diamond bit hole saw, not a butt. And I am cleaning it up with water, and I am drilling this for the plug, which is a 1/4 inch plastic plug that fits in. I get these at US Plastics. And then you will put in a like an airflow nozzle thing, and a little air hose. I can't remember. I did this one of my earlier videos. I think Tanner Serpa did it. I explained earlier where I found it, but it's a really cool little ingenious thing. I used to use silicone and it was a mess. So this is a great way to drain your tanks if you have a vivarium. So I'm going to be using this foam you can buy from Home Depot. I use it quite a bit. I've been using it for a long time and it seems to work well. I'm going to create these little mounds and cork bark hollows to create kind of these mini hills with little tunnels that the animals can go in and out of. But I'm going to have the tunnels dead end just because I don't want an animal to be sick and go back there and get stuck. So what I'm going to try to do is create some cool hides, but at the same time where I can access the animals. And so I'm just going to be cutting some of the foam, hollowing it out like you can see here, and having areas where it's kind of protruding out. And you'll see as this starts to come to fruition, but and I cut that piece, as you can see. It was just sticking out too far towards the glass. It was just a little too much. But these are the cork bark pieces I'm using. They've been sitting here in a very non-humid place, so I feel comfortable using them. Sometimes I've baked them in the past. I don't really see a reason to do that if they've sat out for a super long time and been dry and no humidity. So I've never had any animals get sick from that. But anyways, I am going to be cutting these pieces of foam board. I'm gonna stack them up. I'm just measuring, stacking them up to create these little mounds. Nothing special, again, just kind of to take up space and then to carve them later. And that's what you see here. I'm just kind of siliconing these things together, and I just want little areas where I can form material around them. And these are just extra pieces I have that I can use. And I am going to be siliconing in with G Silicone 1. And then I'm going to be using this Great Stuff Pond and Stone, which is the black foam, which I like. I don't like using the other foam. I'll pay extra for this any day if I can find it. To foam these in, give it a little more structure, foaming into cork hollow there. And once I do that, I gotta let this dry for a while, and then I'll come back and I'll carve this stuff out. And then we will see what we're left with there, and we will continue to work on. All right, so I'm gonna use a hot wire here to trim out some of the foam for these little mounds. I want it to be smooth. I'm gonna be using the Buddy Rose vertical mix, and I want the surface to be as smooth as possible, because sometimes the points on some of the foam or whatever you're using that's the vertical mix is gonna sit on pokes through if you carve too much away. So I just wanna make sure it's smooth and get it a little bit smaller. And so I'm just kind of doing that here, shaping it up a little bit, and then hitting it with a heat gun to shrink it a little bit and make it tight. And now I am basically using some more foam for these cork hollows, and these are going to be some of the areas where the animals can crawl through, hopefully. And I'm going to leave them open in the back so they can get through. Also cutting in a net pot here so I can plant a fern or some kind of plant, I'm not sure what yet. Just using a hole saw to drill through. Probably should have done this prior to putting it in here, but using a screwdriver, razor blade, the hole saw, and end up taking that last piece on the bottom foam off just because it was being stubborn. So anyhow, just getting that ready, and I'll also be putting a paper towel, one of the shop vac towels, in the net pot just to make sure that the Buddy Rose vertical mix doesn't get in and seal it up by accident, because again, you want the roots to be able to grow through. So here's kind of what you're left with right now. It's kind of looking like not great, but it will start to take shape here shortly. And so I am putting the ramp mix. This is the Buddy Rose ramp mix and water mixture to make sure that the vertical mix actually adheres to this. There's a little bit of a delay here because the vertical mix was way too dry. It was crumbly. I always have a problem trying to get the vertical mix just right. Usually it's too wet, or sometimes it's too dry and it's crumbly. So I'm going back, and now I'm applying the remixed vertical mix again to make this look like an earthen, kind of a eroded part of an embankment, and then these kind of coming out of the side of the earth, these wood pieces here, these cork barks. And then I'm also going to be putting in some roots, which I think will look cool, and I'm smoothing the Buddy Rose over the top. As you can see with my fingers, I'm kind of like closing them in because I want them to be secure, because tiger salamanders are beasts and they will bowl through anything. So just want to make sure that they don't fall out. But I really like it. I think it's starting to really come together. And then I'm going to carve it after I get done putting in these roots. But I think it's looking really, really good right now. And I'm going to add a few more, and then we're going to go on to carving this thing out. All right, just using a flathead screwdriver, really small one. Waited about a day to do this just because it was so wet, and I wanted to make this look more like mud than rock. And so this is making it a little bit easier to carve. I enjoy it when it's a little drier carving versus when it's wet. And I'm just, again, trying to make it look like a dirt embankment. Again, I'm going to be coloring this with the Buddy Rose concrete glazes, but this is just the process of me carving it out. I like the way it looks. Again, I'm going to be adding color, so and I'm going to clean the back up. That looks like crap. But I'll clean it up, and really liking the way this is looking. It's really coming together. You can see there some of the things I've etched in. Now I'm adding umber, which is the brown. One thing to note about these concrete glazes, after about a month, all of the nozzles were clogged. So I had a really difficult time doing this. It was really annoying. Probably gonna have to buy new spray bottles for all of them. It's kind of garbage. I don't know why. It was the black one I had to add on literally with like a paintbrush. I didn't even film that, and I barely used any of it anyways, but added the olive, and then there's I think it's like a lighter rust color. I use that as well to make some kind of some iron deposits. I mean, I know in a lot of the ground here on the East Coast there is that, so you can see that in the middle. And I'm just finishing the background. The idea here, it doesn't look perfect. I tried to get it. It's like a puzzle. It was to create like a broken up log over the top of it. That was kind of what I was thinking, at least. And I'm just kind of piecing this together. I'm gonna have to add some more detail. I think it looks good, but it could look a little better. So I'm going to add some more detail here shortly. So this is one of the most satisfying parts for me, is rinsing this off. By the way, for your information, this has been sitting for about a week, about 6 to 7 days at this point. And I am rinsing it off just to get any kind of loose debris, any kind of residue, and then I'm going to dry it off, vacuum up any water, and clean it, and then let it completely dry out. All right, got the old tank out, new tank in, hooked up the Mist Kings on the left and the right. You can see that. Cleaned out the bottom there. You can actually see the tile floor. There were some mummified crickets, some petrified worms, and some green clovers and lucky stars, but it was all good. Cleaned it out. It was nice to do that. And now I'm just putting in the old clay balls from the terrestrial section of the old tank and adding some new ones. They're a little dusty. Some people rinse them off. I will spray them down just so to get the dust to settle. And then I'm cutting out some window screen mesh here to stop the soil from coming through. Always have a little extra on every side so it doesn't creep in. And then I'm putting a lot of the old substrate in. Pretty funny here, there's a lot of springtails, tropical white isopods, and earthworms, but you can actually see the isopods crawling around in this time lapse, which is kind of funny in some of the parts. And now this is just adding extra substrate. Word to the wise here, I am putting in desiccated oak leaves, sphagnum moss, a lot of coconut fiber, and some reptisoil. Reptisoil does have a part peat moss in it, so be careful because acidity for salamanders for some can be bad. I've never had a problem with the tiger salamanders, but I am going to be mindful, and we'll test this with a pH meter, so just a heads up later on. And if it's too acidic, I will probably switch out some more of the substrate and put more cocoa fiber in. I'm putting in some small ferns, mostly lemon button ferns, a bird's nest fern, high up. Hopefully the tiger salamanders don't destroy it. And I'm also putting this bird's nest fern up on the top through one of these cork barks, and I am going to shove in a whole bunch of moist sphagnum moss through the other end there, so it has a nice medium to grow. As you can see, I'm just kind of putting it up there, and here it is. Looks pretty good. I'm going to add some moss and things here in a minute, maybe some liverworts. And some more cork bark and some wood, some driftwood in there from the old one for hides, but liking the way this looks. I am going to bury some of these cork bark flats here to create some hides and also take up some more space to give them some cavities to hide under. It's just a matter of figuring out what works in terms of the space you have with you. So like for instance, I'm trying to put this one piece, it just doesn't fit. So I had to move it around and bury it a couple times. And it's just a process. So whatever comes natural and however you think will enrich the habitat for the animals. And I typically do this a lot. I didn't even show all of it, but I ended up with something that I thought would work, and I went with that. Used again some of the wood from the old build as well, and then I'm just spraying everything down. Putting in some vines that I had from the old enclosure, which will grow out of control. Excuse the plumber's crack. These vines will grow like crazy, so I'll have to trim them back, and I'm also adding some moss that I had. Just not too much, because they're going to probably destroy all this. Just remember that. It looks really pretty now, but this is kind of how these animals are. So as you can see, I'm putting a ton of leaf litter in here. The leaf litter will be key for these animals. I think it retains some humidity under the soil, and it is nice for the substrate. So as you can see here, it looks pretty realistic to me. I really like this. Came out a lot better than I thought. And I'm hoping that most of the plants will stay intact. But overall, I think it worked out pretty well. It looks like a fallen log on top, and then an eroded embankment, and then just about 7.5 to 8 inches of substrate in the back, and about 5.5 to 6 up front. So clearly enough to burrow with some cork and other driftwood buried in there to create some cavities, natural cavities for the animals to create dens or tunnel through. But I really like it. I really hope these ferns will continue to, will continue. I mean, I just planted them, but will grow and not die. And I hope the animals don't uproot everything, which might happen. I mean, again, these animals are very robust, fossorial species. So if it does happen, it is what it is. I'm just sick of using golden pothos for everything because those are pretty robust and can handle the animals. I just don't want to. I'm just sick of using it. So I'm going to put the smaller one in now, tiger salamander. And this is the one that was typically buried in the old enclosure. He's just figuring out his new habitat. And here's the big one. This one would typically stay out, which is why he's so much larger. I didn't like stressing the other one out and digging it up to always feed it, but this one is massive. And so for about a month, I've been feeding the other one to get it to a point where I don't believe this one can eat that one. So let's keep our fingers crossed, but I'm 99% certain it's not going to happen. But I have to watch and make sure. I have not seen any disturbing interactions yet, but they're just exploring the new enclosure, and I will likely at some point add some more substrate. I am going to test the pH of this. Most of it is the old substrate, so I'm not too worried about it. But again, it's something that I haven't really done in the past, and I want to start doing. And it's important. You don't want it to be too acidic. You got to make sure that it's close to a neutral. I mean, I'm sure they can withstand a lot in the wild, but I just want to make sure that it's as healthy as possible for them. So, but yeah, they came right in and are eating. As you can see, I cut a worm with some scissors to split it, just because the one is smaller. It's hard for him to choke down a whole worm, but they are settling in nicely, and I am excited to watch them thrive in here and create some burrows and just feel a lot better about this enclosure than the old one. So I really appreciate everyone's support, and please like, comment, subscribe, and look forward to some new builds. Thank you, everyone.